Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the impact of renewable hydrogen organized by ENTSO-E. We wait for 1 minute for everyone to join, and then we start. Okay, so I would say that we can start with the webinar. Thank you again for joining today's webinar on the impact of renewable hydrogen on the power system, organized by ENTSO-E, following the publication of the recent report on renewable hydrogen. I'm Ilaria Federici from the innovation section at ENTSO-E, and I will guide you through the agenda for today's webinar. Let's say that today's meeting is focused on two main parts. So we will start from the presentation of the study with opening statements from Marco Folteleoni, the Vice Chair of the Research Development and Innovation Committee at ENTSO-E. Then our colleague Rodrigo Lopez Mendoza will introduce the background, objective, and rationale of the study. And Ksenia Tolstrup from Magnus Energy, who supported the drafting of the study, will give more insight on the study on impact of renewable hydrogen on the power system. The first part will be closed by Antonio Liceto from working for ENTSO-E, that will present the study key messages. This first part of the webinar will be concluding with a question and answer session, and during the second part, there will be a panel discussion on renewable hydrogen, in particular trends, impact on the power system, regulation, and market design aspects. The panel discussion will be moderated by Ksenia Tolstrup from Magnus Energy, and panelists are colleagues from DG Ener, NOH, ENTSO-G, the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition, and ENTSO-E. Following the panel discussion, Marco Folteleoni will close with some final remarks, and so without further ado, I will present some rules for today's webinar. So the webinar is being recorded, and all participants are muted. However, in case you want to share questions for the question and answer session, as well as for the final part of the panel discussion, please do so in Slido. And in case you're interested in questions shared by other participants, please also cast your vote on the questions in Slido. To join the Slido, you can either scan the QR code here or use the code available on the slide, and the link will also be posted now in the chat. I would say that we are ready to start, and I will leave the word to Marco Folteleoni, Vice Chair of the Research Development and Innovation Committee at ENTSO-E, for some opening statements.
Thank you, Ilaria, and good morning, everyone who is connected also from my side. My name is Marco Folteleoni, Vice Chair of the RDAC of ENTSO-E. ENTSO-E is the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity, and this is the association of the European Transmission System Operators. It consists of 40 member TSO representing 36 countries, and it's a pleasure for me hosting this webinar, because today we are here for showing you an important paper that we have published the last week. This is the first page of the impact of renewable hydrogen on the power system, and allow me to say that is the last paper of a broader ENTSO-E analysis that we have conducted on a wide range of flexibility resources, which will be needed to address future power system needs. It's not only the only paper that ENTSO-E has published in the last years on the future of energy system, which is particularly the working group in RDAC that deals with these topics, because we have published several papers. I would like to mention in particular the study on the flexibility from power to hydrogen in 2022, on the study on power and heat sectors, the interaction and synergies in 2023. But not only on the power and hydrogen, but also to mention also the position paper on e-mobility, several papers, in particular the last one on EV duty electrical vehicles and their impact on the six systems. It was published 2 years ago, but just to represent that as innovation research innovation committee in ENTSO-E, we are very focused on the application, first of all, in line with the system of system concept of ENTSO-E vision document and the RDI roadmap for the next decade, 2024. 2034 that was published the last year. So this, in particular, this paper is in line with these two main strategic documents of our association, in particular of the RDAC. If we focus in particular on hydrogen, we know that previous ENTSO-E studies focus on technical capabilities of electrolyzer, to provide flexibility through system service, I mean ancillary service and congestion management. But if we see from an innovation perspective, in particular this study, as the presenters and the speakers will show later on, makes a step forward and explore in particular the role of the electrolyzer, and I see also the hydrogen value chain in the power system planning, the operation and the market design. This is important because it consists of innovation perspective, in particular, if we focus on the electrolyzer flexibility potential, and focus, of course, on the coordination between the hydrogen and the electricity system development. In particular, we know that the topic of the development of the hydrogen sector, especially with the electrification of the hydrogen production, will significantly impact the power system. This is the reason why we have analyzed the aspect, and as the speaker will present today, we are today to present an important milestone, let me say, of our roadmap, just to give you a representation of all the aspects that and the key messages that are behind this important role. I do not take more time, just to give you these few points of introduction for this day. I will thank you in advance who are connected, because I see that we are more than 220 attendees. This is a huge number for our association, because it represents a very interest in this topic. As Ilaria said, there are several presentations, of course, focus on this particular paper, but also in a discussion on the panelists. So I will stay with you, of course, for the rest of the webinar in order to give our closing remarks. And I give back the floor to you, Ilaria, and I hope to have a good webinar today with a Q&A and all the panelists. Thank you all for your presence here today with ENTSO-E with these 2 hours together. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I will take the word now. I'm Rodrigo Lopez from the Norwegian TSO, Statnet, and I will give a brief presentation of the background, objectives, and the structure of the study. As Marco mentioned, hydrogen and sector coupling are topics covered in the ENTSO-E vision and strategic roadmap, where both documents serve as a blueprint or guide of what the future system needs in terms of power in the power system view, right? So, and this is to reach carbon neutrality. Thus, the need to develop in studies on the topic. And as Marco mentioned earlier, there are 2 earlier papers that were published through the ENTSO-E portal, which is the first one is the role of hydrogen in 2021 and the flexibility from power to hydrogen in 2022. These 2 studies serve as the foundation of this study, and as we know, the hydrogen environment and the sector coupling is something that is moving, right? So the idea of publishing this third study is to build upon that and also update with the newest trends and technical aspects, right? So this is a collaborative effort from the RDIC, the Research Development and Innovation Committee, and the Market Committee, as we also cover some of the market design and regulatory framework as a scope of this project of this study. And the central focus of this study is to explore how renewable hydrogen, particularly through electrolyzers, affects the electricity system and markets, looking at aspects such as system planning, flexibility, and market design. So break it down into 3 different objects to have a more structured approach. The first objective, the first one is to aim to assess the expected impacts of the renewable hydrogen value chain, specifically for electrolyzers, on power system and electricity markets. And this first objective is the one that is more correlated to the previous papers published and built in upon that, right? So the second one is to seek a proactively offer of the TSO perspective, the power system needs, to help to shape more efficient and integrated energy system, to welcome the newly and fully developed and early developing hydrogen environment, right? So and the third one is to provide a forward-looking policy, future policy and market design recommendations to fully and have a better integration of the hydrogen environment into the power sector, right? And the idea is to reach out and liaise with the stakeholders and policymakers of the sector. So these objectives are backed up by the structure in the study, and something that you will see in the following slides. So the first one is the analysis. The part 1 of the study is the analysis of the hydrogen economic. The hydrogen economic is a trend update of the different trends and developments of critical system integration. And this is giving a context for the hydrogen economy in Europe, covering basically initiatives and policies. For the part 2, it focuses on the systemic role of hydrogen, including how the hydrogen fits in a broader energy system and its specific impacts on power systems. This is covering electrolyzer constraints and costs, some of the hydrogen cost drivers, as well as hydrogen storage and transport facilities, which were discussed in this middle part of the study. And the last one, in the last part, the part 3, it takes a dive into the market design and regulatory framework necessary for a flexible hydrogen production model. This analyzing the different electrolyzer business case, focusing on renewable hydrogen production, and comparing it to potential revenues, providing flexibility power system, and then also providing hydrogen as a feedstock. So a more detailed report you can find in the link that is in both links in the slides. And in summary, the study provides a technical and a policy-driven outlook and an idea, general idea of how hydrogen will influence the bulk energy system and how it impacts the power system itself. So that's pretty much on my end. Thank you so much for your attention. And next is Ksenia Tolstrup will present the work done by the co-creation of Magnus Energy and ENTSO-E. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco and Rodrigo, for this introduction to the study. Good morning, everybody. From my side, my name is Ksenia Tolstrup, and I'm principal at Magnus Energy. And together with ENTSO-E, created this study on renewable hydrogen, which I will be presenting to you in the next 20 minutes. So if we go to the next slide, exactly. So as you already heard from Rodrigo, it is made of 3 parts. And in the first part, with a focus on hydrogen economy trends and developments, the use cases of hydrogen demand, and the expected production facilities. If we look to the next slide, we will see that hydrogen sector has already undergone quite a transformation over just the last 5 years, driven by primarily policy and regulatory push that this medium has been given. And that is very much linked to the push for the overall decarbonization and transition away from fossil fuels, in particular in order to reduce emissions in the hard-to-abate sectors such as industry and transport, but it also plays a role in the future power system, because power system will arguably need significant amounts of system flexibility, and hydrogen is also there seen as one important pieces of the overall puzzle. And if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, you will see that the policy and regulatory framework has evolved quite a bit, starting with the EU hydrogen strategy, Fit for 55 packages, so in 2021, respectively, and now with recently adopted large-scale framework for the hydrogen sector, formalized in 2024 in the hydrogen and decarbonized gases package. On the other side of the same timescale, you will also see that there have been quite a few investment boosters for hydrogen supply and infrastructure that materialized itself through several approved IPCEI projects and already several rounds of the European Hydrogen Bank auctions. However, we also see that hydrogen investments, both in large electrolyzers and the infrastructure for hydrogen, are still very much in their infancy, and this is why we believe it is important to ensure that additional efforts are made to convert investment progress into actual project commitments if we want to reach or get anywhere close to those quite ambitious policy targets that are set by the EU for already 2030, which is already in 5 years. So this is also something somewhere where we need to move rather fast if we want to achieve them. And talking about achieving the targets, it's important to point out that hydrogen uptake is very much driven by hydrogen demand. And if we go to the next slide, you will also see that the sectoral role of hydrogen expected in Europe towards 2050 is split across multiple sectors, and industry has been and will likely remain the main use case across all time frames. So we're talking between 2030 and 2050, whereas also heavy transport, so this is the blue part of the bar, and light teal e-fuels production are anticipated to be major use cases for hydrogen in reaching 2050 carbon neutrality goals. And here, what is also important to keep in mind is that we are looking at the projections as they have been formalized in TYNDP of 2024, so 10-year network development plan submitted by ENTSO-E, and now which is also currently being updated for the new version. So these targets are, of course, also being continuously refined. We should, however, bear in mind that, at least for now, hydrogen demand is estimated to soar 8-fold in just 20 years. And that is quite a significant number. And we also try to look at a little bit the drivers behind that and what can actually enable available production. And that brings me exactly to the next point about available production. And what you see on this graph is expected electrolyzer capacity expansion in the EU. The differences or the estimations vary significantly between the different sources that you could look at. So what you see in colorful bars are the 3 scenarios analyzed and simulated in TYNDP, so distributed energy scenario in pink, national trends, in orange, and global ambition that have different, let's say, underlying overall targets. And there you can already see that the extent of expansion of high electrolyzer capacity in Europe is expected to be extremely high. So we're talking about several hundreds of gigawatts of installed capacity. What is also important to keep in mind for these estimations is that TYNDP uses a top-down approach, so looking really at different technologies from the system perspective. If we look at the, let's say, the converse version of that, which would be the projection by IPCC, so the International Panel on Climate Change, that also makes its own projections on electrolyzer deployment, but from a bottom-up perspective, we see much more, let's say, pessimistic estimations where in 2030, between 1 and 10 gigawatts are expected, and even by 2050, the maximum volume that is expected by IPCC hovers around 85 gigawatt. If we again compare that with the actual situation in Europe at this moment, and these will be the orange arrows that you see in the middle of the graph, we see that the operational projects have not yet reached a gigawatt of installed capacity, whereas those under construction amount to almost 3 gigawatts. So as you can see, there's still a long way to go. And at the same time, what this graph, I believe, illustrates is that there is a really high level of uncertainty about what can really be expected in terms of actual installed capacity. And this uncertainty is also coupled with the uncertainty about hydrogen costs themselves. And this is exactly why it is important to develop integration concepts and best practices in hydrogen business cases from the very outset, again, highlighting that cooperation between multiple system stakeholders. And that brings me to the second part of this presentation. If we could go to the next slide. So we're looking at the main constrained capabilities of electrolyzers and their associated effects, degree of electrolyzer capacity expansion that we expect in 2 different phases, and their associated flexibility potential. So if we go to the next slide. You will see that we structured this analysis along 4 different operational modes of electrolyzers. And these ultimately depend on what kind of ultimate goal an electrolyzer operator is pursuing, whether it is to maximize the load factor, so the operating hours, which will correspond to the base load operation, the demand-driven operation that corresponds to following the actual demand that the electrolyzer providing hydrogen to, system supportive operation that is related to the provision with the focus on providing system services to the power system. So the most, let's say, flexible operation, and finally, market price-driven operation, where an electrolyzer operator intends to minimize their OPEX cost component, and in this way, trying to produce hydrogen in those hours where electricity is the cheapest or even negative prices, for example, are available. What you can also see on the right-hand side, so in the graph, is that depending on the operational mode, one, and depending on the availability of storage and transport of hydrogen, the impact on the power grid that is expected will be different. It is in baseload and demand-driven operation, which are not coupled with advanced hydrogen infrastructure and storage assets, where we see advanced grid congestion risk. However, this risk would no longer be present if storage assets are available for hydrogen production. Whereas in less in demand-driven and more in system-supportive and market price-driven modes, both long-term and short-term flexibility can be provided, especially, again, if electrolyzer assets have available infrastructure in place. And if we go to the next slide, we will also see how that translates into the actual flexibility potential. So something that is very important to keep in mind here is that in this graph, we're looking at the so-called ramp-up phase. So the ramp-up phase until 2030, where we assume that all hydrogen is produced within hydrogen valleys, where there is point-to-point transport, and the storage or large-scale interconnection is not yet available. That is important to keep in mind, because that, of course, also has an impact on the flexibility potential. But first things first, based on the TYNDP projections, we split the different use cases for green hydrogen among the different industries, as you can see on the left-hand side of this graph, which we see as the main driver of hydrogen production ultimately. And then in the analysis, we focus on-grid domestic electrolyzer-based production. And the reason for that is simple. It's exactly that part of the overall overall hydrogen production, whether produced in Europe or externally, that is connected to the European power grid. So on-grid domestic electrolyzer-based renewable hydrogen. What you see in the next column is that depending on whether you're looking at TYNDP or PCC scenarios, the installed capacity range is quite broad, so between 5 and 70 gigawatt by 2030, and the range of flexibility potential differs again quite a bit. While at the same time, what you can also see in the numbers, it still remains largely limited. So we see that for market price driven approach, the flexibility potential is considered to be the highest, because here it corresponds predominantly to the amount of curtailed renewable energy that can be avoided, whereas other operational modes have even more limited flexibility potential. Why? Because, as I said in the previous slide, it is very much linked to the availability of hydrogen transport and storage, where more flexibility potential for the power system can be extracted. Now, if we compare this picture with the 2050 mature phase, we will see that so for baseload, flexibility potential remains 0, whereas the flexibility potential for the other operational modes has increased, so between 12 and 44%. Again, supported by this time available infrastructure, thanks to the European hydrogen backbone and the availability of storage potential, both short-term and long-term. We also see that the targets for the installed capacity, or the expectations for installed capacity, are again ranging, quite wide-ranging, and this is why it is really important to keep in mind this degree of uncertainty. However, we can only extract this flexibility potential from the electrolyzers, regardless of the volume, only if we look at that from that holistic perspective, where regulation, market design, both incentivize the operational modes and configurations that are most beneficial for both electricity and hydrogen systems. And now, the last but not least, maybe also important to consider here, of course, these are, let's say, very high-level details. There's a lot more detail available in the actual report, so I also very much invite you to consider those. And exactly for part 3, we have a dedicated report available on the ENTSO-E webpage, so I also invite you to take a look. In the last part, we take a look at the main cost and revenue drivers of electrolyzers, potential support schemes and market arrangements, and measures that can ultimately be taken in order to enable cost-efficient and flexible hydrogen production. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that in the end hydrogen costs are dependent to a large extent on demand for hydrogen. We already addressed that. On regulatory requirements, which includes not just EU regulatory framework, but of course also the national transposition of those requirements. Siting decisions, this is quite important to keep in mind that depending on which country, at least the electrolyzers are sited, the impact will be quite strong both on ENTSO-E and on the available on other components of that are relevant for electrolyzers. On competition, it's important to consider not just competition among electrolyzers themselves, but also other competing technologies, for example, that are already providing system services. ENTSO-E, that consists of CapEx, OpEx, electricity costs, and other components that we will see on the next slide. And last but not least, as I said multiple times and really highlighted here, available hydrogen infrastructure. And so, as I promised, let's take a closer look at the ENTSO-E situation. And what you see on this slide is a comparison of ENTSO-E distribution of different components in Spain, Germany, and the Netherlands. The outer donut represents the standalone electrolyzers, and the inner donut represents renewable collocated electrolyzers. This is important to also keep in mind that depending on your connection type of electrolyzer, these shares of the different components will also be different. But what is important to keep in mind here is that ultimately electricity costs, regardless of the connection type, do play or do form the largest part of the electrolyzer ENTSO-E, whereas if you look, for example, at grid fees and electricity taxes in standalone electrolyzers, they're extremely country specific and can have higher or lower impact on your final ENTSO-E and business case. Now, if we move to the next slide, you will also see the potential revenue streams beyond hydrogen production. Of course, it is clear that hydrogen production is the ultimate, let's say, business case for electrolyzers, and nobody can, let's say, take it away. That is in particular the case for electrolyzers that are collocated with the demand source, because they are the only, let's say, operational mode that you can physically have is baseload. However, if we're talking about standalone electrolyzers, then you have those 4 operational modes available that we discussed earlier, and their application will depend really on your main goal. And what is important here is that the main goal can also vary over time. So we also do not assume that a single electrolyzer always pursues a single operational mode. It can also vary over time. But depending on the operational mode, it can either provide explicit demand response on top of hydrogen sales through explicit participation as a demand response asset from the power system perspective at different system service markets, or ensuring that they're price responsive, i.e. providing implicit demand response. So here, what is also important to consider is that system services can offer quite an attractive revenue source for electrolyzers, but there are also a number of hurdles that are still present, because they're still then up against competition from other technologies that are more established, and they still have to consider the sometimes rather complex pre-qualification processes. Now, if we go to the next slide, you will see that there are additional, let's say, revenue enablers that can be considered from this holistic perspective that can support the business case of electrolyzer operation that is also system friendly to a larger or a lesser degree. So these are renewable energy PPAs, hydrogen CFDs or offtake agreements to reduce exposure to hydrogen price and volume volatility, removal of barriers to grid service provision, exemption from renewable levies for green hydrogen production, hydrogen guarantees of origin to justify a premium on green hydrogen, and finally, flexible connection agreements to incentivize exactly also grid-friendly siting decisions and avoidance of potential grid congestion. If we look at the next slide, you will also see the outcome of our the mapping of these different revenue streams. And I think, Ilario, if you just can click through the 3 animations that I had. I would like to just focus on these 3, and you can look at the details in the report itself. Since an electrolyzer is really at the intersection of electricity and hydrogen markets, different levers, let's say, are potentially available for them to maximize their business case. On the electricity market side, a flexible operation can provide this additional attractive market-based revenue, whereas on the hydrogen market side, for example, guarantees of origin can play a critical role in certifying renewable hydrogen and providing proof of compliance with EU requirements, as well as a potential additional source of revenue. But here we have to be also careful in considering rather stringent RFNBO requirements that have significant implications on hydrogen production, how much can be produced, and also the implications that it has on, for example, the PPA markets, because there are also quite a few connections there as well. What we did with all these different instruments is that we compared them using these spider diagrams and using 5 different KPIs: economic efficiency, revenue impact, cost impact, operational flexibility, and risk mitigation for electrolyzer operation. And the main message here is that ultimately every single market arrangement that is considered will be associated with trade-offs. So for example, if we look at the offtake agreements, they would provide the highest positive revenue impact, but operational flexibility that can be provided would be rather limited. Whereas operational flexibility will be higher with hydrogen CFDs, but the revenue impact and cost impact will be substantially lower. In the end, this will be the decision that we believe should also be taken again in a coordinated fashion among the stakeholders. And that brings me to the final slide of this presentation that shows you that different measures are ultimately needed in order to support system-friendly hydrogen expansion and prepare it for the final subsidy-free and flexible operation. We're of course aware that these things do not happen over time, and this is why by 2030, it is important to set up the foundation for coordination among the different stakeholders, planning for electrolyzer participation in service markets, and offering direct financial support, such as, for example, investment subsidies. For the growth phase, it is important to enable the scaling and stabilization of the hydrogen sector by enabling flexibilization of electrolyzer technology, reducing levies and taxes for renewable hydrogen production when high renewable output is available, and considering the use of, for example, offtake agreements and cap and floor agreements to shield electrolyzers from excessive risk. Finally, it is in the maturity phase that we expect the phase out of direct subsidies, the use of competitive PPAs, providing explicit demand response by electrolyzer operators, and making the use of or full use of advanced hydrogen storage and infrastructure capabilities. So this would be the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention and would like to give over to Antonio Licetto from ENTSO-E for key messages and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Xenia. I'm Antonio Licetto, working for the Italian TSO, and I'm co-convener in ENTSO-E of the Working Group of Future Energy System. There is much more than we have shown in the reports for who is interested, but let's focus now on key messages to feed the debate and inspire the question on Slido. First, key messages are about grid planning and more general investment infrastructure. So first point is that we acknowledge that electrolyzers, large ones and many scattered over all Europe, will become not only a new load requesting connection, but a new component of an energy system which is going to be more and more integrated. And also, although in a lesser quantity, generation which will be fueled by hydrogen. So we will have power to gas and gas to power. A second point is that there is a high impact about grid planning and operation. So in this slide, we focus on the planning side. And the elements which we have seen highly determining the drivers of this impact are the configuration of electrolyzer and also some of its technical characteristics on which innovation actions also from manufacturer of electrolyzers can do some improvement. but also the connection type and the siting location is very important. As we have, you can see on the bottom part of the slide on some paradigmatic cases, talking about electrolyzers which are on grid or off grid, and in particular the hydrogen valleys, which we think there will be the first investments to be realized, which have a lesser impact on the grid, but eventually when there will be an hydrogen infrastructure like there is the natural gas and electricity today, most electrolyzers in Europe will be of the on-grid, and they will all impact on the planning and operation. So what is impacting on the grids is not all the demand of hydrogen, because some of demand, according at least to the European strategy, will be covered by imports from extra EU countries, and still there can be, at least on a transition period, blue hydrogen, so not produced with electricity. And as I said, also off-grid electrolyzers are not directly impacting on the grid. So we have to focus here on the remaining part, the on-grid electrolyzers. And our main messages here is that coordination is highly necessary between electricity and hydrogen operators, but also with gas and hydrogen infrastructures. So talking about pipelines, distribution, storage, but in general, all the logistic. And this coordination is very important to best satisfy the connection requests. So we look for win-win solutions where there is best satisfaction for the private operator of the electrolyzer and for the grid needs, which are system needs, so to the whole community of electricity user. Also, siting decision can be optimized, like we have a preferential area for renewables. There may be preferential area also for electrolyzers. And all of this is to avoid overdimensioning, to have stranded assets. In the next slide, we focus on operation. And you have understood from all the previous intervention that from the electricity operator point of view, what is most important for us is to have flexibility, especially if this load will be very large, gigawatt scale. So there can be synergies, operational synergies, which must be identified and pursued. This depends very much also on the operational mode, which we have defined. And behind this, underlying this, there is a business model. So it will depend very much how the private operators or electrolyzers will consider also grid issues, not only just to ask a connection and being granted this connection forever, without any trade-off. So it must be a coordination, not only in planning, but also in operation. We believe electrolyzer can technically, economically, and operationally provide flexibility in short-term duration. Flexibility is about demand response, which can be implicit, especially if the operator is using a market price driven from electricity, which is by definition implicit explicit demand response, but also providing offers in the market for demand response. We are talking about balancing, congestion management, in general, ancillary service market, and this could provide an extra stream of revenues. Also, long duration flexibility, it can be important, but here we go from the grid perspective to a more system perspective, as it is shown on the graphic on the right side of the slide. So this will depend not only on electricity and hydrogen operator, but more in general how this sector coupling will be enacted, and will be depending on a very wide and fluid transport and storage facilities. We are talking here about long-term storage underground. So it will be reserve, seasonal flexibility, seasonal reserve. And we also mentioned at point number 4 that the generation with hydrogen or derivatives can contribute also to adequacy. Adequacy is one of the main mandatory task of system operators. So all in all, flexibility, as we can see from the bottom graphic, depends on decoupling double decoupling the power supply profile from the electricity electrolyzer input profile, and also decoupling the output of hydrogen from electrolyzer from the final demand. In the next and last slide, the key messages about market design, regulatory framework, more or less were already summarized by Xenia. Let me just emphasize that we know that in the ramp up phase, the cost of hydrogen is out of market, even considering the penalization for CO2 avoided emissions. So some mechanism of incentive have to be there. So we have studied which one can have more or less distortive effects on the good functioning of the electricity system. So we can categorize them from incentive on the supply side or on the demand side. On supply side, there can be incentive on the OPEX, like the one you see in the text here. These have to be well designed in order to incentivize an operation which is in line with the system needs and the market condition. So instead, the incentive of CAPEX, which are of very different nature, can be more appropriate to reach that. And there are a lot of reasoning and reflection, if you want to make it deepen in the reports. On the demand side, well, this is the typical chicken and egg problem. The demand is waiting for supply. The supply is waiting for off-take contracts. So this could be a good way to start and solve with a public intervention the chicken and egg problem. Also, de-risking and facilitating the purchase contract of electricity. And then a big question mark, I've seen already an intervention in the chat. These constraints for labeling hydrogen as renewable, and so to be entitled to be considered having a decarbonizing effect 100%, are still quite tight. And in the ramp-up phase, they for sure don't facilitate this ramping up. So there might be some flexibility in application of them to balance the impacts on the hydrogen sector and on the power system with the overarching frame of efficient decarbonization. And with this, I will give back the floor to Q&A.
To me, Antonio. Thank you, Antonio, and thank you to the previous speakers. We are a little bit late on the agenda, so I will allow only one question for the moment, so we can keep enough time for the panel, and we can pick up some of the remaining questions for the panelists. So looking at the Slido, thank you for submitting all your questions. Maybe the ones who get the most votes at the moment. A question for Xenia, I would say, how did you assess the potential of the different market design measures?
So thank you for the question. As you saw in one of my slides, we used KPI based. So it is a qualitative approach, which is based on the 5 KPIs. So market efficiency, i.e., how or economic efficiency, i.e., also whether this type of measure has a distortive market impact or not. We looked at whether this measure works towards, let's say, shielding the revenue or the cost part of electrolyzer operation, whether it can provide or incentivize operational flexibility, and finally, whether it helps to mitigate the risks for the electrolyzer business case. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you, Xenia. There are other interesting questions, one on locational signals, one on what is the preferred mode of electrolyzers for electrolyzers developers. I think we'll save those for the panel discussion. So hand back the floor to you, Xenia, to introduce the panelists and moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to continue and to moderate this this panel discussion with 5 speakers from representing different stakeholder groups. So here in the order presented in on the slide, warm welcome to Marco De Benedictis from the European Commission in DG Ener. If Marco, you could turn on your camera. Claude Mangeon from ENTSO-E, Niels Melcher representing ENO. So the European Hydrogen Network Operators, the latest addition to ENTSO-E and ENTSO-G, François Paquet for Renewable Energy Coalition, and last but not least, Javier Barrantes for ENTSO-E. Very welcome, everybody, and against the backdrop of the study that we conducted in this presentation, looking forward to our today's panel discussion, where we would dig a little bit deeper into your view on the trends, potential impacts on the energy system, regulation, and market design. And so you probably have already noticed that in my presentation, I have mentioned it multiple times that coordinated planning for different stakeholders in the hydrogen value chain, both on the electricity and hydrogen side, is crucial. But then the question would be to you, how do you see that electrolyzer developers can coordinate with grid operators on the location and their planning, and whether something is already in place and what is really needed in order to enable such cooperation? Maybe as a representative of ENO, Niels, if you would like to start with the discussion.
Of course, of course. Thank you for having us. We're the new kid here, so we're looking forward to bring our expertise to this panel and to the whole discussion on the implementation and of energy systems. So I think we all agree that it is a really important topic with the positioning of electrolyzers, but not just electrolyzers, also it's hydrogen fueled power plants who can be more beneficial or bring a disadvantage to either the power grid or the hydrogen grid. So this is really, I think we have to focus on both sides of the conversion of hydrogen and power. But really, what can be done and what has to be done, I think it has to be a close cooperation, mainly on the national level, as you stated in your presentation earlier, that there are some countries where it has a big impact on where electrolyzers are positioned, and there are some countries where there's a lower impact. So I think it has to come on the national level, that there is a close cooperation between operators of the grid and of the electrolyzers, as they all have to account for the physics within the grid. So there are regional differences, and you have so what can be done? Probably you could provide a zone where electrolyzers are ideally positioned on the national level and have some benefits within those zones, like cheaper grid connections, something like that. So but I think the first step would be the grid operators from hydrogen side and electricity side to align and find a way, where do electrolyzers, where do power plants fit both networks, both grids, and to align that planning to have a go. What is already in place? I don't think there is too much in place at the moment.
That was also a good cue, I think, for since you mentioned yourself that the coordination between ENO and or the hydrogen grid operators and electricity grid operators would be crucial. I think it's a cue for you, Javier, to react to Niels' statement.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we agree with Niels, and we believe that the foundations for that are already being laid. Indeed, as you said also in your presentation, Xenia, yeah, coordination between both systems is key, both in the development, but also in the operation, and also in temporal and geographical domain, so to say. If we are to talk about current mechanisms, we think the TYNDP already provides a good floor for that, and there are also emerging regulatory tools such as the network code demand connection 2.0 that can provide a framework for aligning both hydrogen and electricity infrastructure planning. What else we can yeah, what else we can do? Maybe, sorry, very quickly, maybe an early stage engagement platforms that allow hydrogen or electrolyzers developers to consult with TSOs during the project design. Also, transparent data sharing on grid capacity, congestion zones, and renewable generation hotspots. Maybe a bit linked to also what Niels was stating about difference between different national systems and so on. And yeah, locational incentives and flexible connection agreements that help guiding the investment towards system beneficial sites.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, and it's good that you're already talking to each other, and that both sides, let's say, are aware of the different pieces of the puzzles that will still need to be in place to enable that. And among other things, so we talked a bit about planning, but then let's talk also about operations. And as I also highlighted in the presentation, of course, from the power system perspective, operational flexibility of electrolyzers is really important. And I also saw some questions in the chat earlier. So what is your opinion on those 4 operational modes of electrolyzers analyzed? Do you see that, for example, one of them is more likely to be used, and then which one? And which one do you believe would have the biggest potential to create a win-win solution, a realistic win-win solution for flexibility provision from electrolyzers? And I think since we have on the panel also Francois representing Renewable Hydrogen Coalition, I think that would be great to know what you think about it, Francois.
Well, thank you for having us. It's a real pleasure. What I first want to say is that indeed you focus on electrolytic renewable hydrogen in this work, and this is very central, because what we are all trying to achieve here, and we are big proponents of that, is to build an electricity-centered energy system. And this is the best way to produce your own electricity here, and that's part of the security agenda that we need to build. And here, I'm very, very happy to hear that, and we believe that's the case. Renewable hydrogen electrolyzers work together with electricity. I would even emphasize even more, renewable hydrogen system needs to become an integral part of electricity system. One is a subset of the other, if I may say, exaggerating a little bit. So this coordination indeed is important between the two systems, with electricity taking a central stage, because there is no renewable hydrogen without renewable electricity. This is very important to say, because we often hear that confrontation, and I think this is completely obsolete. No, one is working for the other. Renewable hydrogen is helping electricity, and you very much reflect that. Very quickly, baseload operation mode, where you have collocation, is clearly in this time frame the main model. It's very simple. This is the one that gives you the lowest cost, operational stability, and therefore there is no wonder why this is the one prevailing. And this will probably fit difficult hardly with being more dynamic with prices or system needs in the first place. But others later, as you very well point out, may have a promising case, and I'm thinking especially about the price-driven one. And this is where really renewable hydrogen can come, and for whatever remains as excess electricity not tackled with batteries, pumped hydro, other demand-side response, then you can potentially locate your electrolyzer in power hubs, take that electricity and turn that in affordable renewable hydrogen. That requires, of course, having a pipeline to ship that where that demand is required. We've got to work on the flexibility of electrolyzers. They can run flexibly. There are different ways of doing that. We can talk about it if you want. Research and innovation beyond just efficiency, but rather working on the flexibility levers, remains key to go beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francois. And indeed, one of the keys that we were also highlighting in this joint work with ENTSO-E is exactly the infrastructure and storage that, of course, can further help unlock that flexibility potential. But would others also like to react maybe to Francois's statement? Maybe Claude, since you haven't spoken yet.
Thank you, Xenia. So I'm Claude Mangin, Market Director at ENTSO-E. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm not an electrolyzer developer, but I will talk about the business model and supply and demand. And for me, baseload operation and demand-driven operation are going together, because you are signing a power purchase agreement to feed your electrolyzer, but you will only do that if you have a flat demand consumption from an industry. And so for me, it's a bit the same mode. Then market-driven operation, it's short-term optimization, and ancillary service, it's supporting system operation. And I would like to take the analogy of the CCGTs who are using those 4 modes to produce electricity, and in the direction gas to power. And here we are going to power to gas, but maybe an electrolyzer should use those 4 modes, because you will need hydrogen in a flat production for industrial needs. You can do short-term optimization like the CCGT are doing when there is a planned trip of one CCGT, another one is taking over. And of course, a CCGT is not running at 100% of this power, but has some flexibility to cope with the need of the electricity grid to sell ancillary services. And the electrolyzer will need those 2 revenue streams, the one selling the renewable hydrogen and the one selling ancillary services, because we are far from having a positive business model. Then you put in your report that market design should reduce the barrier to electrolyzer participation in ancillary services and congestion management scheme. I would like to finish with the electricity network code on high voltage direct current, where there is a chapter about derogation, and the electrolyzer should be treated as well as the other means like demand size response to be able to derogate. We need some flexibility in that ramp-up phase to test the technologies, and we should be flexible, and electrolyzer should be allowed, and there should be a promotion for electrolyzer to be able to sell ancillary services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claude. And I think you make also a very important statement about the fact that in the end, since we do see that there are challenges in enabling a positive business case for renewable hydrogen production, that exactly provision of flexibility to the power system can indeed be, let's say, that quite crucial component that would hopefully lead it towards a positive business case. But what you also mentioned already is the network code on high voltage demand connection, and there where this is the cue for me to discuss with all of you also policy and regulatory implications. And there I would like to ask you what, in your view, from your stakeholder perspective, could be done on the policy and regulation level to support that coordinated planning, that flexible operation, and whether you have some concrete experience of how that could be done. So there, in particular, since we haven't yet heard DG Enner, Marco, would you like to start?
Sure, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the invitation, first of all. Very timely and interesting panel, and for the presentation on the report that I think it was very complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think it was kind of mentioned, even though not explicitly, the RFMBO's delegated acts, of course, kind of the non-elephant in the room, I would say. But that's actually the strategy that has been adopted so far for ensuring flexibility. Am I referring to the additionality, temporal and geographical correlation requirements? And why are they so important in our perspective? Because we really want hydrogen to be produced when renewable electricity is actually there in the system. So when and where there is availability of renewable electricity, then to produce hydrogen. We talked a lot about flexibilities, and in the delegated acts there are already some flexibility provisions. The most, let's say, stricter provision do not apply instantly, but there is a phased in, let's say, foreseen by the delegated acts, because of course we are aware what are the consequences, the possible consequences of not providing such flexibilities. But in the ramp-up phase, this is not as much important, of course. And if we want to kick off with the market, we can allow for some flexibilities. And indeed, the RFMBO's delegated act allow for such flexibilities, for the additionality to kick out in 2028, for the more stringent temporal correlation to start later on in the years. Of course, this is just this is one way to ensure flexibility. There are other ways that are possible. Generally speaking, there could be provisions or incentives. Of course, with the provisions, you're sure about what you are regulating, and you have a much more precise outcome of what you want to regulate. There are, of course, other means to ensure flexibilities, but in our assessment, these were really the most effective provisions.
And I think there, Francois would definitely have something to react on, with particularly when we are talking about RFNBOs. But I guess also beyond, how do you, Francois, see the incentives of electrolyzer operators, and what kind of policy and regulatory support might be needed to ensure this coordinated planning and flexible operation?
Well, the first thing to say is that we need to look at what is already on the table, and indeed the adopted framework, and I would add as well the targets for using hydrogen are the supply side rules, the demand target. They are absolutely key, and delays and inconsistencies will not help in building the right infrastructure that we need. So this is the first thing that we have to say. The second thing, of course, is that we, of course, have not always the need for hydrogen when you have a lot of renewables, or where you have a lot of renewables. So there, the question of infrastructure is so important, and we need to double down efforts on this, and this is good to have this collaboration. And this is why, by the way, hydrogen producers, electrolyzer operators need to be part of the discussion. For instance, drafting committees in ENTSO be at the center of this organization, one way or the other. Now we need to build more than just what has been adopted. We need to build a market design incentivizing, providing money for the flexibility services. In this early market phase, very simply, no or reduced network charges for electrolyzers in those renewable power hubs. That is a location signal to locate there as a way to absorb remaining excess electricity. That's one idea. If you are supporting the deployment of renewables as electrolyzers, are you supposed to be paying charges for the deployment of renewables like we see on energy bills? That's one question. Probably not. We need to see the broader picture here. Remove or reduce somehow grid connection costs to also provide the right signal at the right level. I'm not saying we need to do it everywhere, but where you have big power hubs with a lot of renewables, that may be an idea. And beyond the market design, easy access and fast access to infrastructure, CapEx support for storage on-site beyond pipelines, and of course flexibility as well in the way we think of flexibility for electrolyzers. Not every single plan of projects will need to be flexible. So we need somehow a gradual approach or flexible approach there as well.
Yeah, I think that was also what we were trying to show in the report, that in the end things do not happen over time, and that it is important to have a concrete pathway of how we want to get there in the first place until 2050, and of course that different measures could still be taken along that path. I think since we're talking about policy and regulations, I guess almost every one of you will have something to say. So who else would like to react to this question? Yes, Claude?
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to talk about the delegated act on RFNBO. Indeed, in your report, you said that factors such as additionality and correlation rules significantly affect hydrogen production cost and competitiveness, and it's because of that that investment decisions are not taken, because we do not have a positive business model as we discussed it before. And there was a huge discussion when that delegated act has been voted. Personally, I would be for removing additionality and temporal correlation. And I have no time to explain why, but a guarantee of origin of electricity can give the price signal to produce more renewable electricity, and we do not need temporal correlation. That's one example. So the report, the ENTSO-E report, does not go further than the observation. And so what should be the solution? The delegated act on RFNBO, in Red 3, it says that by July 2028, the Commission will issue a report to look at the impact of additionality, temporal and geographical correlation. Some stakeholders in the market are asking or pushing the Commission, maybe not pushing, asking to have that report earlier, and we need some flexibility and pragmatism on additionality and temporal correlation. And we had some letters from politicians about that. And yeah, so I would advocate for that also. We should have a real grandfathering clause and not a 10-year exemption for additionality. And the monthly calendar temporal correlation should also be extended. Thank you.
And then to give the word to Niels for the hydrogen operators, how do you see that?
Just really quick, it's like I would have more messages, but this is the one I choose for today. It's unifying the standards for grid integration of electrolyzers. That's either on the ENTSO-E side or on our side, or our side and hydrogen side. So as Anne remarked in the opening statement, ENTSO-E has done plenty of research on flexibility and hydrogen, and so maybe this is a good chance to do something in combination with ENO. So this is like an invitation to ENTSO-E to maybe do the next study on the flexibility in cooperation with us. Maybe it's on the unified standards for integration of electrolyzers, but I think we'll find something. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's also why Javier raised his hand. Javier, would you like to react?
Yeah, it was maybe not needed to raise my hand because we were mentioned, but of course, always happy to continue investigating and discussing together with you, Niels. No, I was thinking about the idea on regulatory dimension that you were putting on the table, Xenia. So indeed, we see, and we also put this in our study, that we are in a very interesting point now when it comes to hydrogen, and there are many regulatory and market design decisions, choices to be made to facilitate the achievement of renewable hydrogen targets. And what we try to say in the report, or to provide this idea, is that when doing these decisions, when making these decisions, that an integrated approach of an integrated energy system should be followed. So to make sure that all challenges and opportunities to the different energy sectors between the energy systems, so not only hydrogen but also power, gas, and so on, are taken into account. So yeah, try to have a holistic view, so to say, of the energy system when making these regulatory and market design decisions.
This actually, thanks a lot for this last statement, Javier, because that actually brings me to my last question to this panel discussion before we open the floor also for the audience online to ask questions to all of you, is exactly this kind of system of systems view that would be necessary for the future development and to really reach those ambitious targets. So question to all of you is, in what way do you believe the adoption and the achievement of renewable hydrogen targets can be managed from the power system or the hydrogen system perspective, and where do you see maybe the biggest risks or the biggest potential? Javier, maybe would you like to continue?
Yeah,
since
I
you
can
were...
continue. Yeah, because
and
I
then
was
we can
the
give over
one.
to also to Marco.
Yeah, perfect. So now, as I was saying before, yeah, we think this is very, very important. I mean, to make sure that we have a full picture of the energy system when making these decisions, and yeah, so this means coordination in the development phase, but also in the technical aspects, as also was mentioned before, both in temporal and geographical domains. So, how we see that we can contribute from the TSO side. We see that from the planning perspective, we can lead in the coordination across sectors, for instance, via the TYNDP. So we can ensure that the development of both systems is done in a complementary way. Bringing benefits to both systems. As said before, also flexible operation of electrolyzers. We think it is an opportunity also to get also good benefits from them for system security and to cope with system needs also associated to the energy transition. And any market design or regulatory framework to be decided should incentivize demand response, ancillary services provision, participation in congestion management markets, etc. And also from the development perspective as well, or the deployment, better said, try to see how to promote smart siting and connection strategies. So find a way to encourage maybe via a grid hosting map or with possible locational signals that the deployment of electrolyzers is done in locations that optimize renewable integration and minimize grid stress. So also costs and increase benefit also for consumers.
Thank you very much, Javier. And then over to you, Marco, from the European Commission's perspective. So what can be done? What else can be done on the European level in order to ensure this system of systems view ultimately, in your view?
Thanks a lot. If you allow me, I would just start by focusing on the risks again, and I will try also to answer a little bit on what has been said before. Exactly, what are the risks to not operate flexibly, or what are the risks if you operate electrolyzers on electricity that is not renewable? So we know that if that electrolytic hydrogen not from renewable electricity, from real and true renewable electricity, is 3 times worse from a greenhouse gas emission perspective than the fossil hydrogen. And besides the opposite of advantages on a climatic point of view, there's also grid congestions. There is higher prices for all consumers, which are, and I mean, there's a fossil fuel demand rising up, independency of energy point of view. So this is really what we don't want. This is really going against of all of our objective. So we need electrolytic production, electrolytic hydrogen production from renewable electricity. And we have to be very careful with the risks. Of course, again, in the ramp-up phase, this is not as much important as it would be with the projection of the volumes that we want to have in 2030, 2040, and 2050. But still, we have to take this factor in account to consider from a broader perspective. Getting to what else it can be done. I mean, for sure, as we said multiple times already, storage and infrastructure are essential elements for allowing flexibilities as well. So they're all part of the picture. You cannot have one without the other. So and I really like the intervention before on the integrated energy system overall, from all the gaseous parts and electricity parts. But I mean, from a ramp-up perspective, what we really need is to bring down the electricity prices. As you pointed out, these are the biggest factor. So bringing down electricity prices and a timely implementation of the RED III from member states, because this is what creates demand for real. And a correct and timely transposition of the elements from member states of the Renewable Energy Directive are really what can bring up the demand. And so we are working on it with closely with member states, and we are trying to see what are the most effective mechanisms for them to implement right now.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this, let's say, a big picture view on what is done, let's say, on the EU and the member state level. I guess everybody in the panel would agree that still a lot really needs to be done on all sides in order to make this the setup of a full-fledged hydrogen economy in the EU possible. So it's great to see also the cooperative spirit in this panel. And with that, I would like to thank you for your interventions and open the floor for the questions from the audience that we received in the meantime on Slido. So Ilario, Marco, if you would like to come in.
Thank you, Ksenia. Yes, we have a good number of questions. I will pick simply the ones who received most votes, even if I see some of the topics raised have been already partly touched upon by our panelists. To speed up, maybe I will read the first three. You can also read them, and then leave it open to the panelists to react and pick the ones they feel they want to reply. So first one, have you received feedback from H2 producers regarding the preferred operating mode? I guess that was initially intended for ENTSO-E. And Francois, I think, has partially already replied, but if someone wants to elaborate further on that, feel free to do so. Then how do you see the competition with other sector coupling technologies and battery energy storage? And thirdly, did you discuss the role of more granular locational price signals to improve system services by electrolyzers? These again seems more directed to ENTSO-E, but the other panelists are also free to express their view on locational price signals, for instance. So I would stop here for the moment, and not sure we'll have time for more questions, and yeah, open the floor.
Okay, Francois.
Yeah, I'll take the competition with other sector coupling technologies, for instance, batteries. Look, I don't think there should be a competition, and I don't think there will be a competition unless we design the market wrongly. I hardly see how hydrogen or power made with hydrogen, if that happens, will be able to compete with batteries on a cost basis. And so therefore I wouldn't be too worried there. We just need to make sure that altogether we design a system so that we make it cost effective overall, making sure we use the energy and electrons in the best way. And batteries here will play a key role, as I mentioned, for very short-term flexibility that can be coupled with medium term, and then comes in hydrogen. But I don't think we should worry about the competition, and this is maybe not where renewable hydrogen has the key role to play. It has maybe a complementary role, but not the main role. Here, short-term flexibility will be even more important to avoid issues like we saw in Spain, for instance, among other things. Just one point from my side. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Francois. Let's then move on to, now we have a full lineup. So Javier, you're next.
So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I didn't note the question, sorry, so I may miss one, but starting with the second one, as François also started, so the one on the competition, yeah, in our study and generally ENTSO-E will remain, thanks a lot, Marco, will remain technologically neutral on this, and if there was any kind of issue there, that would be more for the policymakers to assess, and maybe also market participants taking advantage of the upcoming flexibility. How is it called? Sorry, non-fossil fuel flexibility support schemes. Maybe they can also adapt to any situation there. On the member states, on the third one, what are the state hydrogen market design? Is there no? That wasn't, sorry, the one that we were saying. Well, the feedback on H2 producers, we already saw it during the previous panel, and yeah, thank you for highlighting in green. Yeah, granular locational price signals. We've been looking into that more from the perspective of the deployment of hydrogen. So I think I already mentioned, and maybe Antonio and Xenia for sure in their presentation. So yeah, we look into locational signals, but more in the investment decision phase. So trying to find ways by potential locational signals to steer the deployment of hydrogen in those areas of the grid where they contribute the most, and they don't either increase any kind of grid issue in the congestion issue in the grid. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move on to Claude. Oh, apologies, Niels, you were first.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Just to the can you put the questions on again? That would be great. The one Javier just spoke about.
Locational signals. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the signals. Coming freshly to Enno from German guest here, so being in the hydrogen business, in Germany we already speaking about much shorter time frames. So 3 minutes is something that is discussed there, or it's 15 minutes, so everything below an hour. So there is already action in that department, and just wanting to support Francois on his statement to the question with the battery storages. I think hydrogen and battery storages, they are some completely different things when you look at what it is used for and what are the terms you can use it on. So I support that statement that there, if done right, there is no conflict between both of them.
And Claude, if you could pick one question that you would like to react to.
Yeah, it's the question to Marco, and it's on my point to the RFNBO. So I fully agree with what Marco said, that our goal is to have more renewable electricity, to have more renewable hydrogen. But my point is to say that we do not need to have it in real time. What we need is the price signal, because we are not able to trace the electron, and we are not able to trace the molecule in our pan-European system. For instance, biomethane is produced at the distribution level. The biomethane is not going on the transmission level because of the difference of pressure. So the biomethane is physically consumed by the consumer or the household next door to the production, to the injection point. But the biomethane is sold to another end user somewhere in the same balancing zone, or even in another balancing zone, because he's able to pay more for that biomethane. And it's what I meant by price signal. If the need for renewable hydrogen and renewable electricity is getting bigger, the value of the geo of renewable electricity and renewable hydrogen will go up. And this is the price signal I mentioned instead of a real-time correlation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude. And since we only have 3 minutes left for the concluding remarks, I unfortunately have to close the panel after after your intervention. Thank you all very much for sharing your views on this relatively complex topic. And again, very much hope that with the overall cooperation and open discussions among stakeholders, that finally those targets that have been set can also be achieved. So thank you very much. And with that, I give over to Marco again for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be very quick because we are at the ending of this webinar. I think we had a very interesting discussion among the panelists, and very interesting also questions. We talk about scenario trends, the impacts very important on the grids and the flexibility potentials of the electrolyzers in terms of short and long term, regulatory framework, incentives, and the need of coordination that was mentioned during the event. You know, this topic, the hydrogen, is relatively new for TSO, but it's going to be forward. This will be increased important, of course, as ENTSO-E, as a TSO community. We are supporting and coordinating planning as a hydrogen will be inevitably something impacted the power system. I would say that this point, with this webinar, I hope this will be a starting point for the future, for TSO, for all the stakeholders. So I do not take more time and conclude thanking all who attended today. We had